Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Or if you're new here, I'm Jack, I'm 26 years old and I'm living in London. It's great that you found yourself here. You're probably in the situation at the moment because of what's going on in the world. Now luckily this video won't keep you forever, but it'll be 5 quick tips, and if you stay to the end, it'll be my absolute golden piece of advice that you should put in when building any CV. These 5 tips come from my experience as manager and recruiting people for a role, and then also for the roles that I've personally applied for. Tip number 1 is to be concise. There is such a thing as too much information on a CV. If you're successful and you make it through to interview, you can explain yourself, but overkill of information will stop people reading the full thing. It's important to remember there's no need to use too many words to describe yourself. All that people are going to think you're doing is fluffing and filling out, and it's going to detract from the actual skills that you have listed. Learn to convey the information you want to get in as few words as possible to keep the reader interested and make it to the end of the CV. Then on to point 2, and this is precision and overall the accuracy of the information that you're providing people with. As a manager myself, I can tell you that it's so nice to see a CV that pulls out the information very specifically that I'm looking for. For example, in my field, accounting, it's really nice to be able to see how many exams someone has passed already. This gives us a really good point to start with in an interview and ask questions on, and it also means that we can select the right people for the interview in the first place. On to point 3, and this is about the relevancy of information you provide to the recruiter. So the person who is looking at the CV wants to know things that are relevant to the role that they are recruiting for. They're not bothered about if you did something 10 or 15 years ago and it's totally irrelevant. They want to know exactly the roles, and you can skip roles here, which I think is quite useful. If you've got a very diverse CV, you could potentially pull a job from 5 years ago and then not the most recent job, apart from the bits in the most recent job that are relevant to the job you're applying for. Say for example, you go from one industry, you leave it, you move into another, and then you want to head back to that industry. It's absolutely relevant to mention that job even if it was 5, 10, 15 years ago, because that shows that you've got exposure to the industry you're trying to go back into. On to point 4, and this is one that I think is really important. I think other managers don't always see it as relevant, but this one is so crucial for me, and it's to have a personal touch on your CV. You want to see things that bring out the personality of the person behind the CV. You want to feel like they'd be a good fit for the team that you're bringing them into, and that is such an important thing for someone who is recruiting. There's no formal decision being made at that point in time. If someone has the relevant skill set, I'd absolutely want to meet them, but I think it's so valuable when you're applying to a job maybe with 10, 20, 100 applicants to just put something on there that distinguishes you. A hobbies and interests section doesn't have to be long, but anything in there can really give someone who's recruiting a good idea of what the person's like, create a personality associated to the CV, which will hopefully get you in the door. Which brings me on to my final point, which is to be proactive. You want to be sending your CVs out to people personally. You want to be continuously tailoring them to be bespoke to the job that you are applying for. You also want to make it very clear on your CV exactly all of the things you're doing to learn and progress outside of the role. This is really crucial for people at the start of their careers, mainly because getting into, say, finance or IT, for example, can be quite difficult unless you've shown prior sort of learning or knowledge or work experience in those areas. So try and get as much as you can, whether it be volunteering, and make sure you mention it on your CV. Make sure it's very clear to people that you are actively, outside of just working, trying to progress yourself in that career area. That's it for my top 5 tips, and that's to be concise, precise, relevant, personal, and proactive. But I have 2 more things now that I wanted to quickly mention, which are absolutely crucial. The biggest no-no when it comes to a CV is to lie. Never ever lie on your CV. In the digital world that we live in now, it is just so dangerous to falsify information. Never tell people that you're fully qualified if you're not. Never tell people you're proficient in something you aren't. I have seen people do this. I have watched people enter interview rooms and leave within 5 or 10 minutes because they've been given a test on the relevance of their knowledge that they already had. Don't do this. You're only selling yourself short, and it can get you a reputation that you do not want in an industry. But what you can do, which is very closely related, but it's actually my top tip, is to make your wording count. Language is a very powerful tool to getting where you want to be. You could be the person with the most experience in the world versus the person who's only just joined an industry. But if you don't come across well on a CV, which is people's first impression of you normally, then you will not get the role. You need to learn to word things in a way that sends the correct message, not just any message. As I just stated, you should never ever falsify information, but that doesn't mean that you can't use words to get across a point that you're trying to make. For example, everybody supports people in their team, but if you word it on your CV as you've been supporting other individuals in the team, that can come across as a leadership trait. And that's something, if you're trying to get that across to people, you should always be thinking of the way that you're wording things to try and be relevant to the job role that you're applying for. This also goes with cross skills. It's quite often valuable for people who are moving from one industry to one that's totally different, potentially a change in profession, because while, for example, you might be exceptionally good with written communication skills, you should definitely be able to word that in ways that comes across well. For example, if you're trying to become an accountant, it's not as relevant, but it's something that will absolutely put you in great stead in that role, and it's something you should be able to phrase properly to get across to people the value of it. Thank you very much for watching this far. If you've got any questions on writing a CV, then please leave a comment down below, and also like and subscribe if you like this content, as I'll be producing a lot more over the coming weeks. Cheers.